Much information comes your way in any one day. How do you trap it and organize it so it's easily available when you need it? In an information age, that's a pretty key question. Over the last year, I've seen the conversation between taking paper notes and taking digital notes blur. Today, I'm bringing you a conversation with professional organizer Julie Bestry. During the conversation, you'll hear her described as paper first, whereas I am digital first. This is Julie's third appearance in this space, and I hope as you listen to our conversation, you'll start your own internal conversation. The best note taking system is the one that you will use consistently. As Julie and I talk, you're going to hear us, our journeys through junior high, through college, and into adulthood in our own paths. And if you use the Cornell method or would like to, you're going to get some really good information from Julie on it. In an information age, how do you keep up with information? That's a key question, and answering it is like a game of whack a mole. As soon as we think we have the answer, the tools change and the rules change. Please check out the additional information that I'm putting for you in the body of the blog post. It's time for us to get organized and make it look easy. So enjoy the interview with Julie Bestry. Julie, welcome.
It's good to be here, Frank.
This is what, three times now?
I think so.
I think so. You have set a record for being guest. Of course, usually I don't have guests. Usually it's just a solo show. But you have always been such an intriguing person, and thinking back to, I think it was that first time that you were here that I made reference to the old Donnie and Marie show, and you knew exactly what I was talking about. Don, and for those who don't have no idea what I'm talking about, who
You're
are
a
who are
little bit
younger,
country and I'm a little bit rock
yeah,
and roll.
exactly. Yeah, Donnie and Marie Osmond, who were brother and sister, had a variety show together, and her genre was country, his was rock, so they had this little song they would sing. I'm a little bit country, I'm a little bit rock and roll. So, um, I'm I'm a lot digital, and you're a lot paper. And as time goes on, those two tend to blur a great deal. So
But
as I have been,
that's what's so great.
yeah, yeah.
It's like on Saturday Night Live this past weekend, the musical guest was a guy named Shabuzi. And you would think, if you didn't know much about him, you would think, okay, it's R&B, it's rock, it's rap. What is he going to do? And he does very modern country, and he has blended that sort of thing. I think
Yeah.
when you and I have talked about it before, I've said it's hybrid. I am paper first. I am analog first, but I am
Hmm.
still digital in so many realms. But and I'm sure you still use paper at some point in your life, but you are digital first. And I think that you're right. The more we go forward, I don't think anybody's ever going to get rid of paper altogether because
No.
it's quick, it's easy, and it's visual. But I think this is what we want. I think we want a hybrid blended version so that people can sort of pick and choose the elements that work for them.
Yes. And, as I look back as we're recording this in December of 2024 and will air in January of 2025, as I look back over 2024 and what are some of the big themes that have emerged in my life, and what are some of the thoughts that have gone rolling around in my head, note taking has been so much of it. And I was just thinking earlier today, how long has note taking been an important part of my life? And I'm thinking it kind of started about seventh grade. Seventh grade,
Yeah.
when the social studies teacher was basically saying, here's exactly what to write. Okay, here's number one. All right, now under that, letter A is da, 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 and was telling you exactly what to write and the value of those notes was in studying for that particular test. And then it was
Mhm.
history.
And it was nice. And it was nice. So that's a good pun for you. Social studies. It was history.
Yeah.
But the advantage was you were guided. And I agree with you. It was middle of middle school. So about seventh
Yep.
grade, you were given these parameters. Everybody started on a level playing field, told what to write down, what was important. You got a sense of how to create a hierarchy, but you were still using the hierarchy
Uh-huh.
that the teacher created for you. Life is not always so simple when taking notes beyond seventh grade.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so studying for the test meant reviewing your notes. And I guess
Mhm.
that sort of little thing that has lasted to today. Now the test is
Mhm.
life, and so much of navigating life is so much has come my way. Oh gosh, in any one day, how much information comes our way? How can we trap it so that we can go back to it when we need it? So it's gone from seventh grade to telling you exactly what to write. And actually, I think that really extended pretty much through high school. I can even remember, 11th grade, the history teacher saying, okay, we've got a pep rally this afternoon, so we've only got 10 minutes for the class session. Copy the notes down off the chalkboard. Remember that? Copy that he had to write on the chalkboard with chalk. He says, copy those down because those are going to be erased this afternoon, and I'll go over them with you tomorrow. So even up through 11th grade, it was copy the notes. They're telling you what to write. For me, I don't know about you, but for me, it really changed freshman year of college. Then it was sort of you were on your own with the notes that you took. Um, but I want to thank Dr. David Childress, and I haven't seen him in over 40 years. I don't know if he's still even alive, but Dr. Childress, wherever you are, thank you so much for scaring the living daylights out of us, first of all, because when I signed up for your class as a little freshman taking some sophomore level classes, because I'd slept a bunch of stuff, so forth and so on, I hadn't heard about your reputation and how many people you failed. I didn't know about that when I signed up for your class. I did learn about it before the first day, so I was scared to death. And so anything he said that might help me do well, I was all ears. So here's what he said to us. He said, "Okay, y'all take your little notes, but I tell you what, you get back to your dorm room, you sit down and you recopy those notes, and whatever didn't make sense, you look it up in the textbook and so forth." So basically, what he was saying to me was, your notes that you take in class are a draft. Go back same day
Mhm.
and clear these things up. And starting from that day all the way through the doctorate, that was me. My little chicken scratching. Yeah. What was important, what wasn't important, da, da, da. Because it's all going to go in the garbage can. It's going to be recopied into my notebook in a pristine fashion. What about for you? What did those days long ago look like?
Well, it's interesting. It's like I was playing a little movie in my head as you were describing it. So I think for me, the first time I recall clearly having to decide for myself what I was going to take as a note was probably either AP American or probably AP American history. Um, Junior year and senior year of high school, I had Mr. Murphy, God rest his soul. He was an amazing teacher as well. And he treated us as though we were college students, and he just
Mhm.
got up and lectured and asked questions. And his attitude was, it's not about memorizing, it's about understanding. And so one of the things that we developed as a result of that is right around a few years earlier, the TV show The Paper Chase, which had been a TV spinoff of a movie. It was, I think it was on CBS for one year and they moved it to PBS. And it was about first year law students forming a study group. And a number of us from Mr. Murphy's AP American class got together periodically with our notes that we had taken and read through them aloud to one another to make sure that all of us had caught everything. And so that was one
Mhm.
of the elements that I put into practice in college, exactly what you described, that you take your notes, you go back and then make them make sense to you, maybe synthesizing with what you see
Yes.
in the textbook, maybe writing the page numbers from the textbook in the margin of the notes so that you can correlate those, but then comparing notes with other students who also wanted to make sure they caught everything. Because capture, if you don't capture
Mhm.
something, there's no hope that you're going to be able to
Exactly. Yeah.
understand later.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I remember that. And I think one of the hardest things, and again, both of us went to school before, people had laptop computers or iPads, or right? Nobody was taking a portable computer I'd say a portable typewriter to class and taking notes. So
No,
everybody,
no.
everybody was handwriting notes on those little fold up desks where poor, I always felt sorry for the left-handed kids because they were sort of
Yeah, because
trapped
it was
trying to
always
write.
built for the right-handed folks. Yeah, I'm so
Yeah.
glad I'm right-handed.
Yes. But it comes down to um you have to try and capture things quickly when somebody else is speaking, particularly in that academic setting. You hope you didn't miss anything. Some people try and transcribe everything,
Yeah, yeah, you
which
can't
is
keep
difficult.
up. Yeah.
And if you are learning at a pace where you can add, instead of the word change, you can write delta. If you're talking about finances, you can write a dollar sign. So you can add in symbols, but you have to take it from, like you said, that first draft of the information, which you're taking down as speedily as you can. But then you have to synthesize that with the textbook, with
Mhm.
the understanding of other people to
Exactly. Yeah.
determine what have I missed and what connections can I make between the different sections of the material, because
Yeah.
with sociology, with psychology, with any of your history classes, there are going to be elements from one part of the notes or even one day of the notes that you're going to want to cross-reference with others. So
Mhm.
you've got to be able to gather and capture it before you can move on to make the notes useful for you
Absolutely.
for the test, for a paper, for a presentation,
Mhm.
all the way through. So
Yeah. And
thank you for bringing back that memory.
and I always found, the conventional wisdom is always, don't take everything down. Write down what's important. But sometimes you don't know what is.
Exactly.
Sometimes you don't know what may seem important turns out to be a little bird walk. And what
Hmm.
seems like a bird walk may end up being, now I hope y'all were really listening because that's definitely going to be on the test. So I tended to over note take just a little bit, knowing that later today I'm going to be recopying this. So anything I put in here that it turns out, well, it really wasn't important after all, I can just leave it out of the final draft. I'm not worried about having a bunch of stuff in my notes that doesn't have to be there. So, yeah, thank you, Dr. David T. Childress. Uh, yeah, did you use the Cornell method back then? Because I
I
know
knew
you're a
that we
big
were gonna
proponent of it now. Uh-huh.
Right. So what's funny is I had never heard of the Cornell note-taking method until I became a student at Cornell University.
There you go.
And I assumed mistakenly, they say, a fish doesn't know it's in water. I assumed that this was just something that they taught at Cornell. Turns out that Walter Pauk, who developed it at Cornell in the 50s, it has spread, literally across the world. I was introduced to it in my first biology lab of Bio 109, Introductory Bio for Non-Biology Majors, which is a strange place to learn about, you would have thought a social, a history class, something in either the softer sciences, but they introduced it in the lab, the first one we had, to help us take notes in the lecture. And again, I did not know that this was a widespread thing. And
Mhm.
the Cornell note-taking method has proven really successful for ac academic note-taking, but also I find when I worked in television, when you're in meetings, whether at work or if you're volunteering, because it's not just about capture. There's part of the screen or part of the page that's about capture, but then it gives you a column for review and identifying what the most salient elements are. And
Mhm.
then it's got that section at the bottom um, for a summary. And I think that I'm very thankful that Cornell taught that. And I'm wondering why they don't teach this in middle school and in high school on sort of a broader spectrum. I think that about a lot of things that it's like, why don't they teach finances, to sixth graders? It's like, why don't they teach when you need to start note taking independently? They should start by teaching note-taking methods. And I'm not going to say that the Cornell note-taking method is the only one that works, because certainly there are a variety of approaches, but middle school and high school, they taught us to take notes and then break it down to index cards, which was like you say about,
Sure.
copying over
Hmm.
your notes. But the Cornell note-taking method is surprisingly elegant in its simplicity. Here's here's what you're learning. Here are the main points of what you're learning, and here's the big picture for when you have to move forward. So
Yeah.
so I am very thankful. I'm also thankful I don't have to use anything I learned in Bio 109, because aside from the fact that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, I don't remember anything else I learned. Granted,
Exactly.
that was
Yeah.
almost 40 years ago.
Yeah. And of course, at that point, it was still the value of the notes was to be able to efficiently get the information in your head
Mhm.
so that you could do well on the test.
Right.
Because you could not use the notes on the test. Because if you could use your notes on the test and you had good notes, the test would be too easy.
And
But you
heaven
know
forbid that
what?
something is easy.
But you know what? When now we're out in life and you can use your notes, and if you've
That's
got good notes,
mhm.
the test becomes so. I just thought of that. I'm kind of proud of myself for that little
I'm
analogy.
proud of you too. And it brings me back in all the tests we took in AP American and AP European history. Um, Mr. Murphy allowed us to bring in 1 page front and back of notes. So if you could have precise, tiny handwriting, he didn't say it had to be handwritten. So I'm sure had we had computers, somebody could have typed a third of a semester's notes on, in 6-point font, and they could have had every note they had. But his whole sense was, I'm not here to teach you how to memorize. I'm here to teach you how to understand the relationships of what happens in history. Well, so much of what you just said, in middle school and high school, they said you can't use a calculator on a test because you won't be able to carry around a calculator with you in the world. And we all have
Yes, you can.
in
Yeah,
our phones, you know, we
we
have
sure do.
devices
Yeah.
that can do all of that for us. And so the modern world is exactly as you say. Now it's not about memorizing something, it's about understanding it. And therefore, we can have our notes to guide us at work, in dealing with phone calls, in medical situations, and work in play, in anything that we're doing volunteering. In every circumstance, we're allowed to have notes, just like we're allowed to have calculators with us. And that realization means that creating those good notes means we're going to pass the
Mhm.
test of life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so let's move on now to our adult life. Okay. The phone rings and it's someone, it might be a potential client or, but it's a conversation of some significance. Walk us through what you're writing on, what kinds of things you're writing, and then what happens to what you wrote once you hang up the phone and in the coming days.
And that's a great example because today I've already taken a wide variety of notes. So let's start with the client situation. So I take all of my, I would say almost all of my notes start on paper. And I think I've probably shown it off, but I use purple legal pads. I like them because I take them into a client situation. And if I put my legal pad down, it's immediately visible wherever we
Yes.
are, no matter how much clutter there is in the client's space, particularly in an office where there are lots of other papers. Nobody else seems to have the purple paper. Look, matches purple today. So
Yay.
um, so I do that. I have one kind of pen that I use. I use a Pentel Energel pen because it glides across the paper. I can write very quickly. Now, some people who are listening to this are probably thinking, why does this lady take analog notes? But again, I am of the age where I started that way, and I tend to think of things in terms of the geography of the paper. So
Hmm.
I immediately am putting the time and date of contact in the upper left corner so that if somebody contacts me 6 years down the road, I can pluck this paper out and say, oh, well, the last time we talked was in
Hmm.
December of 24. The person who's contacted me, their name goes on the top line on the far more toward the left, and their phone number goes toward the top right. As I'm talking to them, I start with the initial comments that they say so that I can immediately recall. So if I talk to six different prospects, prospective clients before I start working with them, if I don't work with this person until the end of January, this piece of paper is going to go in a folder, a file folder with their name on it that
Hmm.
goes with me to that client. And I can literally take one peek at the review and get all of the salient and relevant points of who's in their household, what prompted them to call, what sorts of disorganization or lack of productivity they are struggling with, so that I can make those notes. If there's something that requires a follow-up, let's say they tell me in the course of things that they're also looking for an appraiser for jewelry. I
Hmm.
can make a note in the left margin, much like on the Cornell note-taking system where there's the Q method. Anything that I want to follow up on, I can make a little asterisk or some sort of note in the margin.
Yes.
I can
Uh-huh.
follow up on that in advance. If the prospect hires me right then, the lower right corner is where I put their address and any essential information regarding, do they want me to park in the driveway or on the street? Do they want me to park on the right side of the driveway because somebody will need to get out of the garage? I've been doing this 23 years now, and I have developed, in general, I only need to take one page of notes. I know what questions to ask about. Do they have any animals in the house? Um, are there any kids who are going to be in the house that we need to work around? All of the things that are in terms of the prospect becoming a client, anything I need to know so that I show up prepared. One piece of paper. So very often I show up at the clients with my work bag, and their little folder has their name on the tab and it's got the one
Hmm.
piece of paper. And the
Yeah.
thing is, by having the notes that I take in advance this way, it follows along that when I go to see the client, we often have in the first several minutes of the session a discussion, and I'm taking notes. And what I have noted, no pun intended, is that when you take notes, like the old stereotype of a therapist, when you're taking notes as somebody's talking, you can still make eye contact. You just,
Yes.
make drawing on the lines. Whereas if you've ever gone to the doctor and either they're typing on the computer or there's a scribe in the office typing on the computer,
Mhm.
you feel a disconnect. You don't feel like
It's a
somebody's paying
barrier.
attention
It
to you.
really is. Yeah.
So
If you're
I
writing, I'm thinking what I'm saying is important to you. It's
it,
important enough that you're writing it down, you're listening to me. If you're typing, I kind of wonder, are you just filling out a form? Are you
it
checking your email? Even though I'm a very digital person
yes.
and realize how efficient it can be,
Hmm.
there is that disconnect. And one thing I want to point out, as you talk about, you're on the phone and you're doing all this writing while you're on the phone anyway. This is not additional time that this is taking.
Right.
This is during the phone call. The phone call's
It's
over. The notes
simultaneous.
are, yeah.
And it guarantees that nothing gets lost. It's very much like when
Yes.
you're taking notes in class, if you're not comparing your notes with somebody else, you could miss something. If I tried to focus solely on the client conversation, the prospective client conversation, and didn't take notes and said, oh, but I'll write down the notes later, I might miss something subtle.
Mm.
When I'm talking to a client, they might use the same expression two or three times that directs me to realize, okay, there's an emotional component that we should have to go back. They made a reference to having been ill or to a parent passing away, and they make these, and there are elements of the subtlety of the way people speak that you can't capture in
Mhm.
your memory the same way you can capture simultaneously in the moment. And I know many people who are very comfortable being on the phone and typing these in their CRM, in their customer relationship
Mhm.
management software, or in their own version of that in Evernote, in OneNote, and something like that. But again, for me, it's it's really an issue of being analog first
Yeah.
because there's that way to capture the emotion very
Mhm.
quickly and without distraction. If I'm looking at my little purple pad of paper, there's nothing else to see, nothing else to look at. If I'm on the computer, a notification could be coming in. Um,
Yes.
you know, there are blinky lights everywhere. And I live on and in my computer screen. I have a computer in front of me and I have another computer here. I have a phone here. I am by no means a Luddite, but I really find that when you capture simultaneously, as you said, with the person on the phone and I'm capturing these notes, doesn't mean, as I'm sure we'll discuss, that there's not something else I can do to digitize these notes later, but it means that
Right.
I am capturing vital information, both the information that's literally being said, but also what I'm taking, my reaction, whether I'm on the phone or in person with the client. I can take notes if I see something regarding their body language. I can make a little symbol to come back to that because I know that they seemed anxious or uncomfortable or wistful when we discussed something. When I'm talking on the phone with a client, I have to listen to sort of the word choice they use, the sound of their voice, and whether they sound a little wobbly because they're discussing a spouse having passed, for example.
Mhm.
And so notes give us a chance to capture the information, the literal words and information, but also our interpretations based on
Right.
these conversations.
Your own thoughts,
Mhm.
not only what are they saying, but what are you thinking while they're talking? Now,
Exactly.
let me ask this. What about the to-dos that come up? That before you go to their house, and of
Mhm.
course, when you get to their house, there's the folder, there are the notes, but the little to-dos that, I don't know, that you're going to go to an office supply store and pick up this and this and this, or
Mhm.
you're going to go and research this and this. how do you handle that?
So that's sort of a two-part list. There is capture, which is either on the phone with them or in their presence. So I was with a client in his office and we were working on straightforward office things. And I moved something and I saw that there's a beautiful pair of gentlemen's leather shoes in the corner of his office. As you know, you tend to notice when something is out of place. I was like, "Eh, these shoes probably belong in his house, for example." And so we ended up having a conversation about how he loved these beautiful, expensive shoes, but that he has trouble finding shoes that are comfortable for him, even though he's
Mm,
paying a lot of money. And so we had a conversation regarding artisanal shoes about how there are both European and American cobblers who will make shoes to your specification. And he's like, it never occurred to me that I could have that done. He's like, sometimes I'm in Europe, I could find somebody. And so I said, I don't know that much. I don't deal a lot with artisanal gentlemen's leather shoes. I said, but I have an entire group of people, all of my National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals, my NAPO people who work with all levels of socioeconomic clientele. I said, I bet I can do a little Googling and I can ask them for some recommendations. Now, had I just written it in the body of my notes, I probably wouldn't have had reason to remember to look at those notes until right before the next session. But as I said, I use just as when I'm on the phone, when I'm with a client, I use that left-hand margin in, I don't know if it'll show up on the screen, but
okay.
that left-hand margin for notation. So I usually use an asterisk for
Okay.
follow-up for me. Now, there are sometimes I will use words or other symbols, but I try and keep that column um, pretty um, pretty simple, pretty streamlined. So an asterisk tells me this is something I need to follow up with. When I get back home, back to my home office at the end of the day, the first thing I do is I go through my notes from that client day and look for anything that's an asterisk or other sort of prompt and move that to my master to-do list. And so, for example, I had that come up. I know that the next time I'm seeing the client is on such and such a date. So I give myself ample time and I don't need to necessarily jump on it immediately, but by capturing the task, giving
Hmm.
myself a cue or a flag to take care of it, and then transferring that to my master to-do list, I've
Yes.
made
Okay.
sure that it's not captured and then lost because you can go and buy something and then throw it in the closet and you may as well not have it if you don't remember you have it. But
That's
if
right.
you but if you acquire it and then you put it, I always say don't put things down, put them away. Well, away presupposes that you have a home that you have defined for the item. For me, the home for my tasks is going to be the master to-do list from which I select items for my daily task list.
There you
So it
go.
goes
Yeah.
from what the client and I are discussing to the paper, make a mark in the margin of the paper, and
Hmm.
then during my pre-assigned time for reviewing the day. Because if I didn't stop at the end of my day to make sure that I caught all of those little things where I say, oh, sure, I'll call you about that. If I don't write it down and then transfer it to the master to-do list, I'm dependent on my memory. And my memory is very strong, but it is finite.
Hmm. Yeah, there's
We can only remember so much. By giving myself the least little bit of a prompt, I don't have to worry that I'm going to forget, and I can remove the stress and fear of forgetting from the equation.
exactly. Yeah, there's the old Chinese proverb that the strongest mind is weaker than the palest ink.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, and that, listening to your system sounds very much like what I was doing once I learned what I was doing back when I was still pencil and paper, back when
Mhm.
my day timer and I were
Yep.
inseparable. You saw me, you saw that book. For a long time, my note taking system was I didn't have one. Now I was good in college, but then when we got out in the adult world, where are the notes from that phone call? Well, they aren't anywhere because I tried various systems and they were all too complicated. And so it was like you over document, and then it's like I don't have time for all this. Forget it. But Charles Hobbs' book called Time Power. There was really a textbook on here's how to use the day timer. And it was like here the for every day you had two blank pages. Well, on the left hand side you had your appointments and your to-dos. And then here was this blank page on the right hand side. And I never understood. I said, well, what's this all about? And it was
I
like,
know.
this is gold. This is the notes that here's today on two pages. Left hand, appointments and to-dos. So in the morning, that's all filled out for you. The other page is blank. Notes from phone calls, notes from one-on-one meetings. So anything you had to jot down somewhere got jotted down there. And if you filled up that page, you took a blank page out of the back and you opened the rings and inserted it right there and kept going. And just like it with the asterisk, I think that's what Charles Hobbs also used was an asterisk means action needed. So your job was later in the day, read your notes, decide what you needed to do about your notes,
Mhm.
put those on your task list. And one little trick he had was, because maybe this task is going to be done next week sometime. And when you do that task, it sure would be nice to be able to refer back to the notes it was taken from. So he would have you jot it down and in parentheses, the date that you took the notes. So now on
I
that
like that.
future date, there's the task, and in parentheses, hey, flip back here. Here's the full body of that conversation. So I did that for years. So then when we're getting all the emails and people are saying, oh, you need to get a Palm. The Palm is the latest, coolest thing. And you could keep your calendar on that. You could keep your to-dos. And I could really wrap my head around how that would be so much easier. And I did eventually go to a Palm, but I spent 2 years thinking about it because the one thing I couldn't wrap my head around was my right hand page. How would I do that as completely and elegantly as I was doing it? And basically, my answer was I couldn't. So I had my tasks and so that was all digital, but I carried a paper journal. And the paper journal was like my right hand page.
Yep.
And it's only been in the last several years when I'm basically working from home. I've got access to a computer all the time. So much of what I do is like this Zoom, where I can have a keyboard in front of me. I can have the person on the left half of the big monitor and my notes
Mhm.
on the right half of the big monitor and taking notes. And I do it in Evernote. Although
Mhm.
so much of the time, if it's a phone call, you know, notepad by the phone,
Mhm.
jot it down, either do what it is and then throw away the little piece of paper or put that information onto my task list, usually pick up my phone and read it into a task or read it into an Evernote note. But still, even I mean, paper I've got around me. Um, and then
I have to say, I'm very
yeah,
proud of you for saying that because the minute you say notepad, so often when I come into a client situation, even if they are very digital, when they have that phone ring, they're grabbing whatever piece of paper is handy, which means it's a sticky note or the back of an envelope or it's the
mhm.
margin of a piece of junk mail. So just by virtue of having a notepad next to the phone is already creating a system that keeps you more organized. So you get a
To be
gold
able to,
star organizer.
yeah, the ability to just jot that down in the moment while you're listening, you're writing, while you're talking, you're writing. Then when you hang up the phone, if the phone rings again or a family member interrupts you or whatever it is, you're not going to forget. The paper never forgets. And there are your thoughts. Um, and with Evernote, for those who are maybe a little bit familiar with the Evernote, but with Evernote, there's what's called the Evernote Helper, just a little shortcut, keyboard shortcut that brings up a little memo pad in the lower right hand corner where I can type anything. And then when I click away, it goes away. And then the little keyboard shortcut brings it back up. And whatever's there stays there until I do something else with it. So for me, that's like the digital version. So like that, phone number that you look up on the internet and you
Mhm.
need to put that down somewhere and it's digital right now,
Right,
instead of writing that on a paper memo pad and maybe making a mistake, I'll copy and paste into that little
right.
digital version of the memo pad.
And,
Because
and
then,
it's
the
sneaky. It
next
just goes,
thing I
boop, there it is.
yeah, and then I might need to take that phone number and now make it part of a task. Well, that's gonna need to be digital, so copy and paste there. And the thing that has really intrigued me over 2024 was that ability for paper and digital to work together. That if you've got the handwritten notes, being able to digitize that without doing what I had to do during those graduate classes when I had graduated to my pristine notes are now on computer printed out in a nice notebook. I was
Mhm.
taking the draft, taking it by hand in class, sitting down in front of a computer and taking the handwritten stuff and digitizing it that way. And then, of course, then we have OCR, where, well, it can sort of
Mhm.
search your stuff. And then what's really intrigued me for a long time was turning it into editable digital text with my voice. I can talk faster than I can type or write. So those
Right.
notes from the phone call let me grab my phone, create a note in Evernote, hit the little microphone key on the phone's keyboard, and start talking and
Mhm.
just digitize them that way. But then, boy, 2024, taking cursive writing, being able to take a picture of that cursive writing and turn it into editable digital text. Are you doing a lot of that at this point?
I'm starting to. I don't have great handwriting because I write so fast, but what I have found is that Evernote can catch most of what I've written enough so that if I have to correct it, I'm getting if you've ever watched YouTube, for example, there is an automated transcript. So it's one of those things where if
Mhm.
I'm getting something, whether it's going audio to Evernote, audio to text, or handwriting to text, enough of it comes through just right that I only have to make a few corrections, saving hours and hours of work. And I figure if my handwriting is legible enough for Evernote most of the time, then I think most people will. If I have to slow down to write really, really neatly, like I still write thank you notes. So if I'm writing a
Yeah.
thank you note, I'm writing one. But if I'm taking notes, I'm just scribble, 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 and then I've
Yeah.
like skipped a word and I'm writing it in sideways to fit it
Yeah.
in. Um,
Because you know what you
the fact
mean.
that
You can read it
right.
later.
And so, the text in a picture that that's a great thing that I have seen where you take a photo of the chalkboard or a photo of the if you're in a meeting and somebody's put that something up on the screen, you being able to capture that, put that into Evernote, have that handwriting translated into text, which you can then have read back to you in your in
Hmm.
your in your computer or phone. It's developing at such a fast pace, Frank, that I think all of the things that have made people feel like they don't want to commit to a system because they're still going to have to do so much extra work to make it all run smoothly, that barrier is slowly ebbing away. And I think that
Yes.
the more we make it so that people can capture their information in whatever way is useful for them, if it's handwriting, if it's voice, if it is taking a photo, and then having it putting in the input in the way that works for you and getting the output in a display that works for you is really kind of magical.
Oh, it is. And as you were talking, I was kind of thinking through 2024 and sort of the things that have come on my radar and not trusting myself to remember what those were. I grabbed a memo pad and started jotting those down. So in 2024, and
Tell me,
I've
tell
done,
me.
yeah, and I've done videos and all of these. First of all, Google Lens. Um,
Hmm.
Gosh, so if you've got an Android and even if you've got an iPhone, you can get Google Lens where you take a picture of something with Google Lens. Like you can take a picture of a flower and it tells you what kind of flower it is and where you can get it and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's like doing a Google search of the environment. And if you take a picture of cursive writing, look at that. Yes, yes.
See, and I have a whole bunch of photos of that because the client and I were cleaning out a drawer that her late husband had used, and we found this thing. We couldn't figure out what these pieces were, but they were all brass. So I started playing around with how to fit them together, and I saw
Oh,
that those pieces would fit together. I used Google Lens to learn that it is called a Chinese lock, and it's like a
okay.
combination lock, but it is designed to, if you needed to put a lock on a cabinet or something, and it dates back probably to the late 1890s, early 19 up through the 19 teens. It took me maybe 3 minutes to take the photos and then play around with Google Lens. And we were just, we were gobsmacked. We're like, we cannot believe that it is. I mean, we're getting closer and closer to Star Trek, where we can just ask the computer to identify something for us. So I
We're
love that you
we're
said
almost there.
Google
Yeah.
Lens because um, I use it all the time with clients when we either are encountering objects that we can't identify, or I have a client where we are going through 50 years of family slides. And it is my main client and her husband has some cognitive decline. And so they can't always remember where the photos were taken. And I am constantly um, taking the
Oh
photo
gosh,
using Google Lens
yes.
and
Uh-huh.
can identify the street or the building in Colorado or in Australia or in Alaska where they were. And again, it's magic. It's
Mhm.
Star Trek magic.
Yeah.
So yay
Yeah,
for Google Lens.
because it's like somebody somewhere at some point has taken a picture of that same building and just gone to the trouble to label it and say a little something about it. And
Yep.
so, with Google Lens, you're searching all that. It's bringing the world's knowledge to you. Google Keep, another way to just take a picture of cursive writing. It'll give it to you in editable digital text. The Gboard keyboard, if you have an Android phone, and it's a free download, it just replaces your regular keyboard, but Gboard keyboard, and so there's just a little menu item where you can have it. Again, you're taking a picture of text, and it just translates it, puts it on its little clipboard, and of course, then who can we can't get by without talking about Evernote. And it's like not only is it reading the cursive, but there are times where I'm going, there's no way that it looked at that word, because it's like I know that that word has an S on the end because I wrote it. But there's no way, if I were another person, that I would look at that little something on the end and say, oh, that's the letter S. Evidently, it's looking at the context of the whole
Yeah.
thing and going, well, for that word to make sense, it would need to end in an S. So, um, it's amazing. We'll take my handwriting and transcribe it into editable text or anything else. You just take any photo, and so here's the photo in an Evernote note, a little button at the top that says transcribe, hit it, and boom, there it is. And then from there, if you want to summarize it, well, you click on the AI edit and tell it
Mhm.
to summarize. Or if it's in a foreign language, to translate it. Or if it's in English, you want it in another language, to hit translate. And of course, now uh, we could have taken this interview, and if I had pulled up Evernote, said new note, and hit the audio hit the audio. In other words, to record the conversation. And people say, "Well, Frank, that's nothing." People have had voice recorders on their phones forever, but this one, it's recording and then it transcribes it into text.
In which
So
case
it's
you can
like,
use that transcription for people who want to read it and take notes. You could turn it into a blog post. You could turn it into
oh
a chapter of a
gosh,
book.
yes. It amazing. And whereas what I talked about before as far as reading things into Evernote, well, you were having to say the word period or say the word comma to get those punctuations. But with this, you're just talking and it's doing capitalization correctly, it's doing punctuation correctly, it's breaking paragraphs. It's like another very intelligent person who was over there in the corner of the room taking notes. So now this the thing of, do I want handwriting or do I need to take my notes digitally in order to have my notes digitally? That's no longer an issue. I can handwrite and then so easily digitize it.
It's a bold new world, Frank. I think that, for the people listening who are our ages or even, the millennials, but for the Gen Zs and I doubt the Gen A's are listening to this podcast, but even if the teenagers, but even if they are, it'll be interesting. This is almost like this can go into the archive because for people who are in their teens or early 20s now who don't know what a pre-digital world is really like
Mhm.
before you had a phone in your pocket. I don't think they can appreciate how, and I hate to use the term again, but magical, how amazing it is that we have these various opportunities where we can have whatever input we choose to get the format of the output we choose with relatively little labor on our part. So I, for one, welcome our AI overlords because
Oh,
they
yeah.
it's really doing what we're gonna have to watch. The one caveat that I have to present is that it makes it so easy that we may sometimes be tempted to go the easy way and not go back and check on things. So when I talked about,
Mhm.
for example, but before we started, we talked about the template for the Cornell note-taking method. You've got your larger right-hand side that you have your notes, you have your left-hand side for the cue, and then the bottom is for the summary. If you're taking notes in a meeting, you can let AI write the summary, chat GPT or in any environment, write that summary for you. and maybe you can trust it or not. But if you're a student, if you're in an academic setting, the
Mhm.
whole point of taking notes is for you to learn, not necessarily learn for the test, but learn for whatever purpose. And if the notion is that your learning comes from developing your understanding, you want to make sure that you're not inviting AI to replace you in the learning process. Because when that happens, I think students would be doing themselves a disservice. But for everything we have to do when taking notes in a meeting, when dealing with like a volunteer situation, when we're trying to capture all of that information and then get a sense of what does it all mean? AI can be very helpful in getting it to the format we want and making sense of it. As long as we don't, and again, this comes back to the analog side of me. It's like trust but verify. I love that we
There
have
you
all of
go.
the
Yes,
digital solutions, but we can't edge ourselves out of the process. We still have to be the final arbiter of where we get the meaning. What
mm,
sense do we make from the material?
absolutely. Yeah. Back in the day, we might have a book on the shelf that we'd bought somewhere that was like, letters for all occasions. So that when you had to write a thank you note or you had to
Mhm.
write a letter of recommendation, you had a model to go
Mhm.
from. You had some ideas, not that you want to copy it verbatim. No, but you didn't have to just start with a blank page and nothing
Give
but
you a
your own
framework.
brain. Yeah,
Yeah.
you could rely on examples from others and add to it to make something that was better than either what was in the book or in your head. And I think
Mhm.
we're right there. Instead of a
I do
book on the
too.
shelf, it's the world's knowledge that we can access, and we can um, not start with the blank page, but don't let AI write everything for you because it's a great first draft. It's a terrible final copy. And you can tell when something's been written by AI. I mean, when there's no human
Oh yeah.
intervention and it's just AI, it doesn't read the same. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
So,
No, I have been intrigued by um Google Notebook LM, and the fact that
huh?
you can take just your documents. My big concern about AI is the fact, the hallucinations, the fact that it makes things up. But I've only played with it a little bit, but apparently you can take PDFs of your own content and have a closed environment and have it write in your style based on the content you've already written. And
Well,
it does do a better job of that. But
mhm.
again, we don't want to work ourselves out of a job as humans. We can't leave it all for the computers and the robots and the AIs to do, because we'd have nothing to do but sit around and eat cookies all day. And while that would be great for a day or a week,
We
eventually
wouldn't want
we
that long
we
term.
we
Yeah,
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 we'd want to get back into the joy
yeah.
of the work we
Of
do.
course, I hear the quote and I love it that, AI is not going to take your job. That's not what you have to worry about. AI will not replace you. What will replace you is someone else who knows how to use
How to use
AI.
AI. Mhm.
So, yeah, and we have so much of this. And like you mentioned, Notebook LM, that's actually on my master task list to
Mhm.
delve into. So it's sitting there. I haven't devoted the block of time that it would take to delve into it and learn it, but I want to.
I
And I
think you
think
and I
that,
need to form a study group and
yeah,
take notes and then
yeah.
compare our notes on what we think of Notebook LM.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the challenge for all of us. Now that these things are there, how is it going to change our workflow? Under what circumstances are we going to pull up a note in Evernote, a new note, and say, record audio rather than hand typing notes. To
Mhm.
make that sort of our workflow where I don't have to get it all right now. I'm going to have the voice transcript. I'm going to have the voice where I can go back and listen to it with the ability to for a verbatim transcript, with the ability to then summarize. So, how do I get myself in the habit of doing that and then editing it rather than being the scribe and then
Yeah.
recopy? How do we change that workflow that has worked for us before? We were doing, and as people, when we're confronted with circumstances, we come up with procedures to handle those circumstances. But
Yep.
so often, and especially with technology, the circumstances change, but our procedures stay the same. Yeah,
And I think what happens is, they say necessity is the mother of invention.
yes.
Um, if you are in a hospital waiting room or an ER waiting room, and you don't have your computer in front of you, and you may have ended up there without a notepad, you're going to use your phone and you're going to dictate. The situation is going to dictate what you have available to do. If you are stuck in an airport because you've gotten snowed in, your circumstances are going to be different. And so you will likely give a different work model, a different workflow a try. But the
Yes.
only way we change our systems is if we make the decision to do it. So short term, we can try something because the situation demands that we do. But long term, to implement that change, we have to be intentional. What is it that our friend Mike says about you have to be intentional and attentional. You have to put your attention on what's important to you so
Yep.
that you can intentionally create and create your systems, create your time, create what you focus on in that way. And I think we are all a little timorous. We are a little afraid of making a change that we can't claw back from. And so we may be slow to make that change until the circumstances demand that we make it quickly.
Yeah.
So it's up to us until it isn't up to us. So
Uh-huh.
take we need to take control when we can. And that, sometimes that takes having a body double or an accountability buddy to work with to say, okay, how's it going with you switching to an audio first approach? So I
Mhm.
think I think it'll be interesting to see how we all adapt to what are new opportunities. I think we have to see that as a new
Yeah,
opportunity rather than a new obligation. So we'll
absolutely.
work on it.
Yeah. Julie, this has been a pleasure. And for everybody that's watching and listening, I hope there's some things that have gone on your task list. Now, we haven't taught you exactly how to use Google Lens or any of that. We haven't taught you exactly how to do it. But hopefully what we have done is arouse some curiosity so that you've got some things on your to-do list to go and research and find a good YouTube video on this particular one little thing or that particular one little thing that you want to try and implement in your workflow so that when you get to the end of 2025 and it'll be there quicker than you know it. Look how quickly 2024 passed. And so now we have the opportunity. Here we are in January. Let's let's not waste another day on things that don't matter. We have been given so much in the way of tools to make our lives easier. And all we have to do is, we've got the ruby slippers. All we have to do is realize that we can
Come
click them
together.
together 3 times and some really wonderful things can happen. So, gosh, thanks for tuning in today. And Julie, again, thanks so much for being here for the third time. And this probably won't be the last time because it is always such a pleasure.
Frank, it is always a delight to get to hang out with you and hash over all of the issues of our world. So thank you for having me.
So, what was your takeaway from the interview? Are you about to check out the Cornell note-taking method or develop something similar for yourself? Did we get the wheels turning in some other way? Back in school, you took plenty of notes. In fact, if a classmate sat there in high school or college and simply listened to the teacher, listened attentively, but just listened, you probably think they were crazy. They wouldn't do well on the test. You and I know you've got to take the notes and then you study the notes so that you can do well on the test. I mean, that was just the way it worked. And the teacher wouldn't let you use your notes on the test because that would make it too easy. If you could use your notes, it would make it too easy. But there's another test, one that we call life. And in life, you can use your notes. So the question is, how good are your notes? And how quickly can you get to your information so that you have it at your fingertips when you need it? With tools such as Google Lens and Evernote AI transcription, we're able to take handwritten notes and turn them into editable digital text. Given this capacity, why would we not use it to our full advantage? How much time would it take you to get really good with this kind of transcription? So good that it becomes part of your natural workflow. How much time would it save you once you mastered it? As you look at ways to get better in 2025, I hope that this episode may have just been the springboard to get you moving forward. Thanks for stopping by today. This has been Frank Buck, helping you get organized and make it look easy.